Good evening, guys. This is Joshua Klein, your host of the Draft Beard podcast. Tonight, we're going to be discussing my final rankings for the 2024 NFL Draft. Draft season is completed. The draft is just days away, and we're going to go through position group by position group. We're going to go through my rankings. We're going to get started with that right now. So tonight, we're going to start off with safeties, and you'll see on my screen here, I'm going to go just give you a brief rundown, 1 through 10. My top safety this year is Javon Bullard. You'll see my round grade right here. I gave him a second to third round grade. I see him more as a slot receiver. Number 2 is Jaden Hicks out of Washington State. Tyler Nubin out of Minnesota. If you look here, some of my sleepers or surprise guys are Mustafa from Wake Forest. Really like him a lot. He reminds me of a Bob Sanders light. I know that style player doesn't really fit as much today in the NFL game. He is going to come up and he's going to smack you hard. I really like his game. The similar style with Braid from Maryland. His problem, though, is he just has trouble wrapping up his tackles. If he could wrap up his tackles, he would be a really good functional box safety. And one of my favorite guys is kind of a weird dynamic. It's Sione Buckeye from Utah. Hopefully I didn't slaughter his last name there. But he's a guy who can play safety. He also can play running back. That's where he started at the University of Utah. Safety class is a little bit below average. As you see, my top safety is a borderline second or third round grade. And really, Bullard's probably going to be more likely to be playing in the slot. If I scroll down here, you can kind of just get a little bit of overview in my top 20. But it's a below average class at safety this year. No first round grades, no second round. There'll probably be someone maybe drafted in the second round. I don't expect anybody to be drafted in the first round. That's my brief safety overview with the 3 guys I kind of like, as you see there with the little Z's there showing sleeper, right? Now we'll get into cornerbacks. And this year, this is a very loaded cornerback class. It's deep. It has some high-end talent, not high-end in terms of like you're going to get a Sauce Gardner type player in this draft, or a Jalen Ramsey, but there are some really good corners. Obviously, you see my number 1 corner is Mitchell out of Toledo. That guy just is tenacious, good tackler. He can cover. It's going to be a good press man corner. I've got Cooper DeJean out of Iowa as my number 2 corner. Can play a little bit more zone. He's not necessarily going to be a straight man-to-man coverage guy. I do think he can develop into a good man corner. I think he's just going to be a good jack of all trades guy. You want to put him in safety? Do you want to put him in the slot? Do you want to line him up outside? Just kind of move him over. Maybe you want to match him up Jalen Ramsey style a little bit with the top receiver. I really do like Cooper DeJean, incredible athlete. You might see him used more in kickoff returns and punt returns, especially with that new kickoff rule. I have Tyrion Arnold at number 3. And then I have Kool-Aid McKinstry from Alabama. He is my number 4. TJ Tampa out of Iowa State. Long corner, okay tackler. He's willing, a little bit more of a man press guy. If you notice my rankings in corners, I tend to steer towards guys who are more man guys who can bump. You got bump players, a little bit more press coverage than zone guys. I have Mikey Sanders still, being a huge Michigan fan. That guy is a very smart football player. I still think he has a lot of room to grow. The nickel position is becoming more and more important in the NFL with how passing heavy it is. So if you can get a really good nickel corner, see the Kansas City Chiefs and Trent McDuffie, they're very valuable. I think Mike Sanders still is going to develop into a very good Pro Bowl type nickel corner. Then I have Kamari Lassiter out of Georgia. I think he's a guy who can play a man system. He can play a zone system. He's just an all-around really good player. Rakestraw out of Clemson. I like him. I think he has a really good tenacious attitude. I know people get compared him to like a Devin Witherspoon, light type player. Worry about injuries. He's not as athletic and as fast as you want. He is an excellent tackler. That is another thing I look for in my corners when I'm looking to grade them. If you can be a willing tackler and if you can be really good at it, you're going to move up my rankings. And then here's the surprise. I know a lot of people are going to look at that and go, you have Nate Wiggins at 9. Listen, he is thin as a rail. Yes, he is fast. He's athletic. He plays tough. His play style worries me that he's going to be prone to injuries in his career, given how thin of a frame he is. I was also felt the same way about Emmanuel Forbes last year. I had Emmanuel as a second to maybe third round grade last year. I have Wiggins as a second round grade this year. I'm just not that high on Nate Wiggins. I understand the athleticism and the things that people do see. Then number 10, I have Chris Abrams-Drain. He's my second favorite nickel style corner. I almost like him. He's comparable to his other Missouri teammate in terms of how I like him, but he's going to be more of a nickel. Rakestraw can play on the outside. Gave that a little bit more value. And then if you look down here at players kind of 11, 12, 13, 14, I mean, you might want to include 15 here. These are some of my favorite guys in the class. You got Kyrie Jackson out of Oregon, Ronaldo Green, Bo Melton, Andrew Phillips, and Elijah Jones. I'm much higher in Elijah Jones than most people are. All of those guys are going to be really tight. They're sticky man corners. Green played great against Neighbors. And the reason I put Jackson at 11 in this group of a tier I have here is the height. At 6'2", he's athletic. Green, Melton, and Phillips are a little bit shorter, a little bit smaller. I like all three. You could move them around 11, 12, 13, kind of swap them around a little bit there. That's the order I put them in. I would be very happy if you drafted a player, if you played man coverage as your scheme in the your secondary. I'd be really happy with any of those guys. And then I have another one of my favorite nickel corners. That's Jones out of Florida State. And then Kalen Carson kind of fell down my draft board as the season went on. Really good tackler. Cam Hart, good size. I didn't see as much of the ability to have his man coverage, excelling in man coverage as I thought he would over the course of this season. I think he can develop into an okay man coverage guy. He's got the length. He's got the athleticism. And then Jarvis Brownlee. And I'm not a big fan of DJ James. Again, I don't like small, wiry corners. I know they're fast. I struggle with that. It's just not my style of corner I'm looking for. Josh Newton, and then Smith Wade, and then we start getting down here into some sleepers. And then I'm going to highlight one guy here, and that is Stiggers out of, yes, this is the CFL. If you're not familiar with him, he did not play college football. And when I started this process, I go, who is this guy? I kind of looked at him as like an undrafted free agent type. More I maybe grabbed a little bit of tape from the CFL. I'm like, look at this guy's, he's got something. Hasn't played a lot of football. He didn't play college football. And then more and more as the process went on, I looked at look, you're going to have to get him in the 5th round. You're not going to be able to wait 6th, 7th, or get him as a priority free agent. So I kind of moved him up my draft boards there. I have him in my top 175 players in this year's draft. He is a sleeper to watch out for. He's going to get drafted. At first, like I said, I thought he was a guy that wouldn't even be drafted, but I'm going to be wrong on that one. I definitely think you're going to have to use a mid-day 3 pick, and it wouldn't shock me if he was drafted late in the 4th round. But those are my top corners in this year's draft. Again, I got 3 first-round grades. I believe as we go through this, I have 23 total true first-round grades this year. Last year, I had 16. This is a much better class. And as we all know, this is a very heavy wide receiver class. Next, we're going to move into linebackers. Not a very good class at all. Not very many starters. A lot of special teams type guys. There is one guy I really like, and that's Junior Colson out of Michigan. The more and more I watched his film, the more and more I realized, really, he just might be this year's Jack Campbell. He is going to be an everyday 3-down linebacker. I don't know if he has Pro Bowl potential, but he's going to be a very good starter that you're going to plug in at the linebacker position. And he's the only guy I feel that way in the linebacker class this year. Peyton Wilson, man, he is an exciting player to watch. He's got the injury concerns. You've got Adrian Cooper. I think he can be a good guy that you can use as off ball that can blitz. Gray from North Carolina, good coverage guy. And then some other guys I like Jordan McGee and Wallace out of Kentucky here, and Jeremiah Trotter. Those are about the end of the list that I see that guys that could maybe be a starter. But most of these guys, you're looking at part-time players and special teams players, not really a great class at all. I think outside of Junior Colson, I really was indifferent about most of these. Some of them got some good traits, but it is definitely a C- to D graded class this year. So with that, we'll move right into defensive tackle. And here are my top defensive tackles. I never strayed away from Jerzon Newton. Last year, I really thought that he would come out into the 2023 NFL draft. One of my favorite players last year, and nothing deterred me from that. This guy is going to be a very effective pro. You are going to notice his disruption in the NFL game on defense. I absolutely love Jerzon Newton. I have him in the top 15 overall on my big board. Byron Murphy, again, he is going to be a dynamic player, a Quinnen Williams type impact on the game. So I think you have two high impact defensive tackles in this class, which drives up the value total when you're looking at the class as a whole. After that, I think it starts to fall off. When I watched a lot more of these guys, a little bit more happy that I saw a little bit more starters than I initially thought I would see. Fisk from Florida State, another Western Michigan guy, and Jenkins. Fisk is going to be more of your pass rusher. Jenkins, an all-around defensive tackle. See both of those guys, they could blossom into starters at the NFL level. Now, Brandon Dorlus is kind of an enigma. I'm putting him at defensive tackle. That's where I think he could be a better pro. I know he tried to go through the draft process and try to come on to be a defensive end. I don't see his game like that. No, that gives him versatility of being an outside-inside guy. I think he'd be a better player and more opportunity to be a starter at the NFL level if you moved him into defensive tackle. Here's an enigma guy, and that's T'Vondre Sweat. Look at this guy in college was absolutely phenomenal. He had huge PFF grades in both pass rush and run blocking. He's gigantic, but he's not Vita Vea in the sense that he's an athletic 340 to 360 pounds, right? The worry is, how much is he going to be on the field? And now with this whole DUI stuff through the draft process, that's a big red flag. Or how much does he take football seriously? He has phenomenal talent, man. If this guy could get himself into a playing weight where he could play more than just 2 downs, he could be a great pro. But it's not something that I want to use an early day 2 pick on. I would not be shocked if he did slide into day 3. He's my number 6 defensive tackle. Once we get here starting at Sweat, most of these guys that I see as you look down my list, Carter out of Duke, I think he's a very low floor player, doesn't have a high ceiling. But most of these guys I don't see developing into 3-down starters in the NFL. Maybe, which is why I put Carter in a row at 7 and 8. They do have some potential. That Mason Smith is an enigma, all the talent in the world. He really needs to be coached up. One of my sleepers, Christian Boyd out of Northern Iowa. He's kind of like, reminds me of Detroit's Broderick Martin. I really wasn't familiar with him too much last year. And about the last week and a half before the draft, I kind of like, oh, wow, this guy's could develop and be a really good run stuffer. Never expected him to be drafted in the 3rd round. But I really like Christian Boyd. Probably going to get some slack for Michael Hall Jr. I know a lot of people have him in the top 50. I see him as more of a situational interior pass rusher. And then as we round out my defensive tackles here with Wingo, Harris, Davis from Clemson, Luddett from Florida State. He is a guy who is fun to watch. He's going to be an absolute mauler in the run game, but that's about it. If you're looking for kind of a developmental defensive tackle there, I like Justin Rogers out of Auburn, a little bit lower out of Taylor, out of Miami, Florida. But overall, you're looking at the top 2 defensive tackle prospects in this class with Pro Bowl, All-Pro potential. I think you got Fiske and Jenkins, who could be starters, 3-down starters in the NFL. Dorlus, depending on where he's at, and that's where your 3-down starters at defensive tackle kind of stop in this year's draft. Next up, I'm going to take a little drink, and we're going to move into the edge class. All right, edge class here. Here's another guy that I didn't vary my opinion on from last year. I love Jared Verse. I think he has a very low floor and a pretty decent high ceiling. Never strayed away that he was going to be my number 1 defensive end in this class. Absolutely love the guy. He has potential to be a very, very good starter at the NFL level, maybe crack a Pro Bowl or 2. And then there's Laiatu Latu out of UCLA. Again, the medical concerns. He is technically sound. I mean, if you know anything about the NFL draft this year, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but Laiatu Latu, he has got as many tools as you can possibly fit into that tool bag, and he lugs it around and he grabs them and he uses them very effectively. He's not as athletic as you'd like to see out of an edge rusher, But without the medical concerns, maybe he probably would be edge 1 in this class. But he's also going to be a quality starter from day 1 with, again, Pro Bowl potential. Next up, Dallas Turner out of Alabama. Really good athlete. I think you develop into a 10 to 12 sack guy. I think he needs a little bit more development than the first two, which is why I have him at number 3. Now, here's where my opinion on the edge class. From here on out, I think there is a massive gap between 1, 2, 3, and then the rest of the class. 3 quality potential starters worthy of first-round grades. Once we get here, Darius Robinson is more of an edge-setting defensive end. Really, he played mostly inside early in his college career. He's going to be able to play anywhere kind of along the defensive line. Marshawn Nealon, really good athlete, has 1 or 2 moves, needs to develop more tools in the toolbox. Jonah Ellis, one of my sleepers, really like him a lot. Really good pass rusher. He's not going to be able to be really good in the run game, but he could develop into a 3-down player. Then you got Adisa Isaac. I have him ahead of his teammate Chop Robinson. Adisa had definitely not the athlete that Chop is, but he has a little bit more polish to his game already, which means year 1, he's going to be able to be a little bit more effective on the field than Chop. Now, just say the least, not a fan of Chop Robinson. Not at all. He is an athlete only who really, really needs to be coached up and understand how to have a pass rush plan. You're not going to be able to out-athlete people at the NFL level. It's just not going to happen. You get him coached up, you get him developed. Yeah, maybe you get a Danielle Hunter type player. That's his ceiling. His floor, out of league in 2 years. I just don't see it with Chop. I would never use a first-round draft pick on him. You want to develop him at the late date to your 2nd round, 3rd round pick. I can understand that. That's where you want to take a guy you can develop him. And if you get the ceiling out of him, man, you hit a home run. But if not, you're going to strike out real quick. And then after that, I've got Braylon Trice and Gabe Murphy. I'm much higher in Gabe Murphy than a lot of people. I think Trice and Murphy are very similar players. They're not very athletic. They use their high football IQ and the high motor effectively to get the job done. And then I have Mo Kamara out of Colorado State, pass rush specialist. He's got a couple of moves. He's going to really be a 1-down player, right? You want to get him just kind of like a Detroit Justin Houston role where we saw for that stretch of 8 games with the Lions. Mo Kamara, put him in that same role. He could develop a little bit more than that. Chris Braswell. And then once we start getting down, you got, Jalen Hunt out of Houston Christian, developmental guy, lot of athleticism. Then again, Nelson Caesar, Xavier Thomas, Solomon. You just look at this list. These are all guys who are not going to be starters in year 1. They are going to take some time to develop. Most of these guys are going to be situational pass rusher types. That's just what the rest of this class is. Outside of the top 3, Darius Robinson from Missouri is definitely going to be a starter at the NFL level. He's just not a pass rusher. He's an defensive end. He's an edge player. Marshawn Nealon could really develop into being a very special player. But look, a lot of these guys here, this edge class, not day 1 starters outside of the top 3. So if you're a team who needs one right away, that's not going to be what they're going to be doing in year 1. So that class is a decent, very top heavy. I have a huge tier gap outside of the top 3. Now let's move into the interior offensive line. We'll go through these really quick. If you haven't checked them out, you can check out my interior offensive line videos. I have my top 7 centers, my top 10 guards already out there on my YouTube channel. If you want in-depth conversation about those. I did spend more time this year with the offensive line. Something I wanted to learn. I wanted to learn, what to evaluate, how to evaluate those players. It seems like it's easier to do corners and edge rushers and quarterbacks. Offensive line is super hard. I don't know how much I really learned and, how well I evaluated these prospects over time. We're going to learn, but I spent the bulk of my time this year trying to figure out what is good offensive line play. And I fell in love with a couple players. We'll start right away, just very briefly. Number 1, Jackson Powers Johnson. Absolutely love this guy. He's one of my favorite players in the entire draft. I have a top 20 grade on him. I think he's definitely going to go in the 1st round. Zach Frazier, a wrestling background. He's just going to, beat you up to death. That is a theme, honestly, of a lot of these offensive linemen this year. They're either athletes or they're just going to maul you to death. Speaking of the athlete, that's Bo Limmer, Tanner Borrellini. Athletes at the center position, Cedric Van Pran, Hunter Nourzad, and then another athlete in Dylan McMahon. Dylan's another one of my late round gems who I really like that can be a backup fill-in center or guard. I don't see him developing really into a long-term starter in the NFL, but I really like his game. So those are my centers. If you really look at 3 through 6, they're guys who could develop into starters at the NFL level. I don't think they're going to be able to come in and plug and play year one, but I wouldn't, bet against them succeeding at the NFL level. I think they have low floors, low ceilings, like those guys, kind of have them grouped together, but decent center class. And again, some of these guys can move over and play guard if they need to, but the class is elevated by Jackson Powers Johnson, no doubt. Zach Frazier is a quality starter. I actually need to fix that. That should say West Virginia there. But next up, we'll move into my guard rankings, and you see, without a question, it's Graham Barton. Where do you want to put him, tackle, guard, or center? I put him at guard. I think that's his best long-term position in the NFL. He has potential to be an all-pro 10-year starter in the NFL. Christian Hayes, Beebe, McCormick, and Morgan. Those four are kind of grouped together in a tier. These three, Hayes, Beebe, and McCormick, are absolute beasts and maulers. Jordan Morgan is a little bit more athletic. I know you're looking at that. I view him more as a guard, not as high on him as some other people out there. Still have a second round grade on him. I think in my big board, he's in the top 40. And then we got Christian Mahogany out of Boston College, much higher on him than most people. Again, he's another one of those mauler, going to go straight to the whistle type guys. He's going to be a really good guy on screens, can pull for you. Dominic Puny. And then Zach Zinter and Delmar Glaze and Trevor Keegan of Michigan round out my top 10 there. Puny, once you start getting to number 7 here, the rest of these guys in here are all developmental guys. I think Puny could develop into a quality NFL starter. If you look at Barton, Hayes, Beebe, McCormick, and Morgan, they're all guys I think can come in, and maybe even a little bit Mahogany can come in and play year one if they had to. Mahogany, like I said, maybe. Puny, he's going to need some development. Obviously, Zinter with the injury. The more and more I watch Delmar Glaze, I just fell in love with that guy and the way he plays. He's going to need some development. He can play center if needed. He is a tackle. I have this guard class that's super, super deep. If you look here, I have 19 guys that have a first round grade through 5th round grade. The reason that gets elevated is a lot of these guys play tackle in college. Their better position, I think, is going to be guard in the NFL level. So I think you have a ton of guys who can be very serviceable backups as their floor and can develop into good starters. If you need a guard in this class, there is a high probability you're going to find one. Rounds 2 through 4 are loaded with them. So if you need a guard, this is a very high quality class this year for interior offensive line. Now the tackles get more of the pub than the guards do. As you can see, without a doubt, Joe Alt of Notre Dame, he's in the top 5 of my big board. He's number 1. And you got Talisi Fuaga. Really love Troy Fangio of Washington. Guy is super athletic. Fashional from Penn State. J.C. Latham from Alabama. So you see here, I have 4 first-round grade tackles. Then we start getting into, I have a group here, Tyler Guyton, Kinsey Sumayatia, and Amarius Mims. All 3 of those guys are developmental tackles. They're not going to be, I think, ready to play the first year. All 3 of them are boom and bust prospects. You see here, I'm definitely lower than Amarius Mims than the consensus. I'm much higher than some people on Sumayatia or right about there. So all 3 of these guys are raw. They're going to need some development. The player I actually worry the most about is Amarius Mims. He's big, but I just have injury concerns with him. You can go and watch my tackle video that'll get posted if you want more in depth there. Roger Rosengarten at 9, an athletic, tall offensive tackle, could play guard if needed. Then Patrick Paul, Brandon Coleman, another athletic tackle. That is a theme with the tackles. They're very athletic. I really think you have if you need a tackle, again, you're going to find one. I think the upper tier of the tackle class is better than the upper tier of the guard class. But once you get to right here at number 16, I'm much lower than Amagaji from Yale than you see a lot of publications out there. But after that, it falls off drastically. So very good class. I would give this an A-rated class. If you need one in the top 15 to 20 picks, you're going to find a starter. You have high ceiling guys are here in Suits and Guyton. I think Rosengarten, I like him. I think he could develop into a good quality starter. There's lots of tackle class. It's a really good class. This is the year, if you need an offensive lineman, this is the year you want to need an offensive lineman because this class is absolutely loaded. Tight end is kind of like the linebacker class. It's meh. The only saving grace of this tight end class is that you have a generational talent in Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers is an amazing player. You can play him in the slot. You want to line him up along the line. He's going to be a great player. And I just think because the receiver class is so loaded this year and the offensive line class is so loaded, you might be able to get Brock Bowers in the middle of the first round when in any other draft year, you would be having to use a top 10 pick on a player like Brock Bowers. Teams would just have to game plan against him. He is a phenomenal player. Any team that gets him is going to get that Travis Kelce type blanket for your quarterback. I hate to ever use the word can't miss with the prospect, but he does have some flaws like every prospect. He's not as tall as you'd like to see in a tight end. But love Brock Bowers. If you're anywhere familiar with the draft, you already know who Brock Bowers is, and he's by far and away the top tight end. Where I differ a little bit with a lot of the consensus is right here. A lot of people have Sanders at Texas at number 2 and in a second round grade. I didn't. I really like Ben Sinnott from Kansas State. I'm just going to give you this player comp. A poor man's Sam Laporta. You can move him around all over. You want to line him up as an H-back. You want to move him outside. You want to have him play inline. I really like him. Big sleeper of mine. Theo Johnson, Penn State. They just produce athletic tight ends. And the rest of the class is average at best. You got some injury concerns here with all. Ryman is more of just a blocking tight end who might be okay at catching the ball. McLaughlin at Arizona is really just a wide receiver at tight end. And then as you get down here, you got a lot of blocking tight ends. It's a below average class saved by Brock Bowers, and that's basically where I'll stop with that. Wide receivers. Absolutely insane class, especially at the top. And as you know, we become more of a passing league. And the more and more offense there is out there, especially coming from college to the pros, the more and more every year, the wide receiver class is just going to be so loaded. My top 3 players in this draft are Marvin Harrison, Rome Odunze, and Malik Neighbors. Now, some people may differ with me, like Odunze 2, Neighbors 3, Harrison 1. I think they're all pretty closely graded. I know a lot of other pundits will have Neighbors way higher or Harrison's just in the class on his own. I think they're just all 3 going to be Pro Bowl wide receivers. We're going to be talking about this class for years. Marvin Harrison is more of a Z. Odunze is more of an X. Neighbors is more of a slot. All of them are going to be able to change the game in their own way. And I think teams that draft him are getting generational all-pro wide receivers for a very, very long time. Like I said, they're graded 1, 2, 3 on my big board. Absolutely love those 3 guys. It's pick your poison, right? I get why Marvin Harrison is seen as the generational best wide receiver prospect since Calvin Johnson. I don't know if that's exactly the case, but Rome Odunze and Malik Neighbors are superstar potential guys starting from day one. Wouldn't be surprised to see them make an all-pro in their first couple seasons. There's a reason they're all going to go in the top 10. And some teams probably going to get one late in the top 10 because of the quarterback run that we'll see. Next up is Brian Thomas. He's my last first-round graded wide receiver. I kind of had him in a tier on his own. Really good vertical threat. And then once we get 5 through, just keep going into the 20s, there's so many good receivers. Now, here's where I kind of separated my receivers. I kind of have a style. I want you to be a very good route runner. So that's why McConkey and Pearsall are elevated, and I have them at 5, 6. Roman Wilson, I have him at 8. Again, I think he's a pretty good route runner. Xavier Legette, I really like him. I know he's not the greatest route runner. You're going to have to use him on crossing routes. But I think a team that utilizes him well, he's not as tall as South Carolina, said he was, because most colleges, that's what they do. They fib on weight and size. But if you watch him, I think he can develop into an A.J. Brown light type player. Teams that know how to scheme for him, they're going to reap the rewards. I think he can develop a better route tree, but he catches the ball well. I really like Xavier Legette. Roman Wilson, I think he is a sure-handed receiver who you can use in the slot. He can play outside, honestly. I know he's small, but I really like Roman Wilson a lot. If he goes to Kansas City, I'm just going to shake my head and watch out. Like, seriously. Here's a guy who's an enigma, right? Is Keon Coleman. I've had him up the board, down the board. I kind of settled him in back in the top 10 again. I think he has enough play speed and contested catchability that he's going to be a factor. Think DK Metcalf. That's just how I see him. He could also be Calvin Benjamin. I know I don't like playing the whole helmet scouting game, but he also could develop into him, which is basically a lack of development. Or he could be a Kenny Golladay type receiver, if you remember him from the Lions. So I've moved him back into the top 10. I just think he has something that is lacking with NFL receivers right now. You have a lot of guys who are either small and shifty and fast, or a lot of thin, wiry guys coming out who are fast. There just aren't guys like him who are built with his size and ability to also return punts. So I moved him into my top 10. I moved him ahead of A.D. Mitchell and Troy Franklin. Here are two guys where I go back and forth on them. A.D. Mitchell, when you hear that he has outwardly said he takes plays off, I just go, really? And you want me to think that you won't do that at the NFL level? He has all the talent in the world to develop into a world-class wide receiver. I just don't want to bet a first-round pick, and maybe not even a second-round pick on that. It's his high ceiling, which is why I kept them in the top 10. Troy Franklin, I have him 11. He's a speedster guy. I don't dislike him, but I don't love him either. And then a guy I really like is Javon Baker. That guy just catches everything. Like, seriously. Played at Alabama, moved to UCF. I think if you're not familiar with this game and he makes it to the pros, you're going to go, really? Some team got him in the third round? I have a third round grade on him. He's one of my favorites in this class. I needed to move this little sleeper thing down. And then we have Paul from Washington, Malik Washington, another small guy who just catches the ball. You throw it to him, he's going to catch it. Now, here's a guy that I know that a lot of people are going to look at that and go, you have Xavier Worthy that low? Look, maybe it's because last year I feel like I got burned on Jalen Hyatt, right? Loved the speed. But a guy like Xavier Worthy, he gets beat too much off press. He's going to need to kind of be schemed open. I have my concerns with him maybe as a route runner. Look, he's blazing. He's a burner. He's blazing fast, right? He's not that, he's slight, right? He's thin. I know he's tall. He's 6'1", but I really worry that teams are going to be able to jam him up, make him not as effective as possible. He's going to have a quarterback who can either throw the long ball or make sure you throw him the ball in timing so that he can use his speed. Think, Tyreek Hill. Because he's blazing fast. He's got absolute potential. I have him as my 15th rated wide receiver. That just tells you how deep this class is. This class is insane. He's number 15. You could see 15 wide receivers go, 15, 16, 17 in the first 3 rounds. So on the first 2 days of the draft, that's insane. Right after that is Jermaine Burton. Again, another guy I really like. I think there's some more off-field concerns with him. He's a guy who just catches a lot of stuff. He has elite quickness. He is a guy, unlike Worthy, he's going to get off that press coverage, and he runs his routes very well. Next up is Jalen McMillan, and then Malachi Corley. Not as high in Malachi as others. I think he's going to have to be schemed up a little bit. And then Johnny Wilson of Florida State. I put him, some people say he should play tight end. Maybe he should. He is an unbelievably tall guy. How effective is he going to be? I don't know, like he drops the ball too much, and he isn't as good on contested catches as I would think for a guy who is 6'7". So I think he has potential. I have him as number 19. Then we have Jamari Thrash. We have Jerry Rice's kid, Brennan Rice. A guy I really like is Luke McCaffrey. A guy, again, number 22 and 23 here. Obviously, McCaffrey is 6'3". Aeneas Smith is, I think, 5'9", 5'10". Two different players, but they both do one thing very well, and that's what you're supposed to do as a wide receiver. They catch everything thrown their way. They're like vacuum cleaners with their hands. That's why I have them as 4th-round grades. And then I have an enigma in Dontez Walker out of North Carolina. He started his career in college at Kent State. He's got potential. He's going to need some work and refinement to be effective. I've got Cornelius Johnson at 26. I think he's a guy who's going to be a much better pro than a college player. He's 6'3". He's got some speed. I think he can develop into, say, a Josh Reynolds type role in the NFL. And then one of my sleepers is Joshua Cephas out of the University of Texas, San Antonio. He is a yards after the catch monster. And then, sorry about that. And then here I'm going to move this one down. Here's another one of my guys that is a sleeper. I really liked him a lot early in the draft process as an excellent possession receiver in the style of an Anquan Bolden. Razmi Jackson is a lot taller than that. However, he tested brutal. I think he ran a 4.8 140. He's slow. He is a guy that you can be able to use as a good possession receiver, an end zone threat. I moved him down to a 5th-round grade. I thought maybe he'd be an early day 3 type guy as a good number 4 receiver. He still may develop in that. Man alive, 4.81 as a wide receiver. And then that rounds out my top 30. The receiver class is loaded. I mean, I get into the 39 or 40 draftable graded wide receivers. So most of you are going to be familiar. The first hour of the draft is going to be wide receivers and quarterback heavy. And I don't know how many wide receivers will end up getting drafted in the first round. 5, I would guess 5 or 6, maybe a little bit more. But this is an A+ class. Moving over into running back, definitely not like last year. There is no high quality all-pro type running backs in this class. There's no Bijan Robinson. There's no Jahmyr Gibbs. I have Blake Corum narrowly as my number 1 running back. He's this great low floor. I know the knee injury that he suffered at the end of the 22 season there, it definitely hampered him. You kind of see him came into his own. He reminds me a lot of Chicago Bear, now Detroit Lion, David Montgomery. I think Blake just has a high floor. He's going to be a guy who's not going to lose yards. He's pretty much always going to get you positive yards. I think he's better catching out of the backfield than people think. So he doesn't have the ceiling as the 2 guys behind him in Benson and Brooks. Those guys definitely have much higher ceilings. I just think Blake can come in and be more effective right away earlier in his contract. Jalen Wright is a speedster. He moved up my draft boards really, really quick after watching him. Another guy I fell in love with. He's just going to pound the rock, and that's Audric Estime out of Notre Dame. Then you come down the list, you got Lloyd, you got the athlete in Tracy Jr. out of Purdue and Shipley. Bucky Irving, he is a breaking tackle machine. Then Watson out of Memphis, Davis. A lot of these guys are going to, they'll be serviceable 2nd, 3rd running backs on your roster. Nobody that I'm like, ooh, I really got to have. If I needed a running back, love Blake Corum. I'd like Benson. It's really the top couple guys. I'd really like Jalen Wright. And maybe Estime. Those are the guys in the top 5 who I maybe could develop into running back number 1s. But pretty much everybody I see is RB2s, RB3s in this class. Nobody with exceptional skills. There's nobody that's exceptional at catching the ball out of the backfield. There is not an exceptional guy at breaking tackles. Nobody has exceptional skills in this class. As you can see, Blake Corum and Benson in 2nd, 3rd round grades. That's when you'll probably see pick 50, pick 60, somewhere in there where the first running back might go off the board. Unless you're Jerry Jones of Dallas, maybe they'll do it because they're going to need a running back. But that's the running back class. Now we're going to get into the big one, and that is the quarterback class. I only really looked at 8 guys. I didn't really go beyond that. Just didn't have the time this year to really get into it. So you're going to look at this and go, Caleb Williams is number one. That's pretty much standard across the board. I'm not as high in Caleb as a lot of people are. I have him as my 5th overall player. He's not number one. He's not number two. He has all the skills in the world. He's not as tall as I would like. He is kind of an enigma. But then again, so is Aaron Rodgers, right? Like, you can have a quirky, weird, prima donna personality and you can be successful. He is not as NFL ready as some people think. He is going to have to learn to take that first read. A lot of people want to compare him to Patrick Mahomes. And I had this conversation today with another my friend who does podcasting. And we both had the same conclusion. Patrick Mahomes sat behind Alex Smith. And I think he learned how to exemplify how to play quarterback in the NFL. Meaning that you don't always have to look for the big play. You don't always have to be the guy that's going to make the unbelievable play by throwing that ball from the one hash mark over to the other hash mark because you can. I think Caleb's going to have to learn to take the right read and not always look for the biggest play. There's nothing wrong with doing that, right? So I think Caleb Williams is a dynamic player whose ceiling is ultra high. I think his floor is, a good NFL quarterback who's going to pull your hair out with some of the stuff he does, just, like make the right play. Because, you're not going to be able to do a lot of things that you got away with in college. But I completely understand why Chicago would take him number one overall. So I'm not like saying I'm so low on him, I wouldn't take him number one overall, because that's what happens with quarterbacks in the NFL, right? If you hit on one, it just changes your franchise. If you don't, you're fired. That's basically the way it works. And as The Athletic reported, those picks from 2 to 10 in the last, 12 or 13 years, it's a 60% bust rate. The quarterbacks who have the highest probability of working well are the ones who are picked number one overall. We overdraft them based on where they actually are slotted on that scale of, 1 to 30, 1 to 100. We overdraft them because we have to have them. And I think we play them too early. Anyway, that's just my thoughts on quarterbacks. Getting into I have 2, 3, and 4. I have them all bunched together. I believe I have them ranked between 11 and 16 on my big board. And here's why I put McCarthy 2, Daniels 3, May 4. I went with the highest floor and kind of went in order. I think McCarthy has the highest floor. We've seen what he can be in college. He can just be a really efficient, athletic game manager, right? That's his floor. His ceiling is not as high as Drake May, and his ceiling is not as high as Jaden Daniels. But his floor, I believe, is higher than both of those two. He does a lot of the things that NFL teams want. He plays within structure, right? He is a very good leader. He makes the right read more often than not. And in a lot of these big games, he came through. Yeah, he had to learn in the TCU game. Yeah, he kind of stunk that joint up there, right? With the pick sixes. Came back the next year, he played efficient, and he led his team to the national championship. The enigma is, who is he, right? Did Jim Harbaugh and the University of Michigan run the style of offense and the style of their team because that's what Jim thought he could do to win, right? He could get not 5-star recruits, but 3 and 4s and coach them up, use the strength coach that they had there and beat people. Well, yeah, it worked. Or was some of that maybe J.J. McCarthy isn't the franchise, put the everything on his shoulders type quarterback? We don't know. But the only thing we do know is that he has the floor of at least a functional game manager. I compare him, think Jared Goff, but with the ability to have mobility. That's probably his ceiling, a mobile Jared Goff. Obviously 2 different playing styles, right? Because JJ doesn't do well throwing over the middle. He has too much speed on his ball. He needs to learn touch. Then you got Jalen Daniels and Drake May. I put Daniels ahead of May because the trajectory has been going up with Jaden. He has made improvements year after year after year. Obviously, the concerns are when he runs, man, he needs to learn to slide. I think he is injury prone, waiting to happen. And then Drake May out of North Carolina, right? He's got some stuff he needs to work on. He's got the footwork issues. He's got some accuracy issues. His ceiling is Josh Allen, right? I don't hate Drake May. I have him number 4, but I just think that 2, 3, 4 are so closely bunched. It's going to depend on the flavor of the style of offense, the offensive coordinator who is drafting him. What style do they want to play, right? I could see the team going with Jaden Daniels at 2 with Washington because he's got that scrambling ability, right? I think, what is his floor? Like a better Justin Fields? What's his ceiling? Deshaun Watson and Lamar Jackson. With Drake May's ceiling is, as we've discussed, is Josh Allen. But his floor is, he's out being, holding the clipboard as a third string quarterback in a couple of seasons, right? So, and then there's Bo Nix and Michael Penix. I think they're both borderline first round graded quarterbacks. I put Nix just narrowly ahead of Michael Penix. The biggest reason is Nix is a little bit more athletic, and I think that he's just going to be kind of like a Drew Brees type player in the NFL. If he gets drafted by Sean Payton, he's probably going to be successful. I think he's a guy who can be a mid-level, 15 rated NFL quarterback. He's very accurate, right? So I don't think that's going to be an issue. Unlike what I think it is going to be for Michael Penix. Yeah, he throws a great deep ball, but if you really dive into the numbers, Michael Penix is not as accurate as you would think. He has blazing speed, but he's afraid to leave the pocket now. That doesn't mean he can't develop into a very good NFL quarterback. I think he can. Low floors and lower ceilings in both Nix and Penix, which is why the teams and myself have them rated as quarterbacks 5 and 6. Pick your flavor. If you want, pick, Nix at 6 or Penix at 5, but they're very close. I have them, I think, in between 28 and 32 ranked on my big board, somewhere around there. I just went with Nix by a hair over Michael Penix. I just think the better athleticism and the style of offense that an offensive coordinator can develop for him is going to be more apt to be successful than a gunslinger down the field, Michael Penix. So with that is my overview. Those are my entire rankings. I'm not going to go through my entire big board here, but I'll just give you a brief overview here of my 3 wide receivers. I have 1, 2, 3, Joe Alt at 4, Caleb at 5. Love the tackle class, so I have Waga 6. I have the 2 D tackles here in the top 10. I have Graham Barton as number 10. And then this is where you see McCarthy, Daniels, and May all here grouped between 11 and 15. Brock Bowers just outside the top 10. But you see right here, I stop at 23 players who have a true first-round grade. A lot of people don't realize in most NFL drafts, there are not 32 first-round graded players. They're usually far from it. So there you can see it. And if you'd like access to my draft board, I would be glad to share that to you, to share my Google Drive file. It has been a fun process. This time next year, hopefully I will have done a lot more videos and get a lot more better at presenting all this to you guys and giving you a lot more information that you guys want. It's been a learning curve on trying to do all this stuff. I love the NFL draft, and I'm glad that I decided to do this and do my own podcast and share all my thoughts with you. So with that, thank you guys so much. Don't forget, like, subscribe.
The Draft Beard Podcast. The Draft Beard Podcast.